I want you to try and cast your mind back to your childhood for a second.
Oh, that's a big request right at the start.
Right. But I mean, really try to put yourself back into that very specific cognitive space. Maybe you were 4 or 5, maybe 6 years old.
Okay, I think I'm there.
Try to remember that sprawling, entirely invisible architecture you built around yourself. Like, did you have an imaginary friend?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of kids did, right?
Yeah, or, I mean, if it wasn't a fully fleshed out, invisible person walking around with you, maybe it was a specific stuffed animal.
Like a bear or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A toy that possessed this highly detailed, super rigid personality that you assigned to it. And think about the sheer logistics you insisted on to maintain that reality.
Oh, the logistics were intense. Like setting an extra plate at the dinner table.
Yes, or leaving a totally empty space in the car seat because, they needed a spot.
Refusing to let your parents turn off the closet light because the bear was afraid of the dark.
Right, all of that. You have to maintain the rules.
Mm-hmm. And that incredibly vivid, entirely fabricated social world of the young child. I mean, that is a massive cornerstone of developmental psychology.
It is.
We often look back on it with so much nostalgia, viewing it as this harmless, quirky byproduct of a developing brain.
It is deeply nostalgic. But today, we're taking that exact childhood memory, that innocent extra plate at the dinner table, and we're using it as the entry point into a modern reality that honestly completely upends how we understand psychological development.
It really does. It's a huge shift.
We are going on a deep dive today into a widely discussed article from May 2026. It's titled, "The Architecture of Repair: What the Machine Cannot Repair."
Which is a fascinating piece.
So fascinating. And we're looking at this text alongside a whole stack of foundational developmental psychology research. We're talking foundational theories from decades ago, right up to brand new guidelines that were just issued by the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Right, so the mission of our exploration today is really to dissect how a fundamental shift in the nature of childhood companions is altering the psychological landscape.
And by shift, we mean AI.
Exactly. Specifically, the integration of advanced artificial intelligence into physical toys. We are examining a core paradox here.
Which is such a wild concept to wrap your head around.
It is. It's the creation of a companion that is flawlessly attuned to a child's needs.
Yeah.
I mean, it never fatigues, it never loses focus, and it never misunderstands.
It's perfect.
Yes. Yet, we need to analyze why that exact manufactured perfection might be structurally incapable of teaching a developing mind how to actually exist as a human being in a complex world.
Which is heavy. But, if the premise of this deep dive sounds like just another critique of technology, it really isn't.
No, not at all.
It's actually this radical re-examination of human imperfection. Whether you are raising a child right now, or you work in education, or you're just endlessly curious about how technology interfaces with our neurobiology, this discussion frames the friction of our daily lives in an entirely new light.
It frames it as essential.
Exactly. We are going to look at the messy, frustrating, metabolically exhausting flaws of human interaction and uncover why those flaws are not bugs in the system. They are the system.
They're the whole point.
So to understand what happens when an AI toy starts talking back to a child, we first have to map out the baseline. Like, what was that imaginary friend actually doing from a clinical perspective?
Right. To establish that baseline, we really have to examine the methodology and the findings of developmental psychologist Marjorie Taylor.
Okay, let's get into her work.
Prior to her foundational work in 1999, the psychological consensus on imaginary companions was actually quite mixed.
Really? Mixed how?
Well, and it was occasionally pathologizing. For a significant portion of the 20th century, if a child insisted on bringing an invisible entity to the dinner table, a lot of clinicians and parents viewed it with suspicion.
Oh, wow. Like they thought something was wrong with the kid.
Exactly. There were serious concerns about dissociation, withdrawal from reality, or maybe some underlying trauma.
That is so sad. Just a kid playing and adults are like, this is a crisis.
Right. But Taylor approached this not with clinical anxiety, but with rigorous, structured observation. She and her team conducted extensive, in-depth interviews with hundreds of young children.
Hundreds of them. That's a lot of data.
It is. And they categorized the types of companions, differentiating between, invisible friends and personified objects, and they mapped the interactions.
And the prevalence of this behavior, when you read her research, it is just staggering. It completely shatters the idea that this was some fringe thing or a compensatory behavior for lonely kids.
Oh, absolutely. Her data revealed that roughly two-thirds of children invent some form of imaginary companion before the age of 7.
Two-thirds. That's a massive majority.
It is a statistically dominant behavior. And what Taylor's research firmly established is that this is not pathology. It is a vital mechanism that psychologists refer to as normal cognitive scaffolding.
Normal cognitive scaffolding. I love that phrase.
It's very descriptive.
Because scaffolding implies that the child is building a temporary framework to construct a more complex skill. So if a kid is having a tea party with an invisible rabbit, they aren't hallucinating. They are running a simulation.
That is the exact functional mechanism.
Yeah.
It is a secure, completely self-generated sandbox for practicing social and emotional cognition.
A sandbox they completely control.
Yes. When a child projects fear or anger or sadness onto an imaginary companion, they are externalizing their own internal state.
Taking it out of their own head.
Exactly. They're taking an abstract, overwhelming emotion, placing it outside of themselves into a manageable vessel, and then practicing how to regulate it.
That makes so much sense.
And they're also engaging in the highly complex cognitive task of perspective taking. They're holding a mind separate from their own in their working memory.
Which is hard work for a tiny brain.
Very hard work.
But what I found so fascinating in the source material is the specific, almost theatrical role the parent plays in this traditional dynamic.
The parent's role is crucial here.
Right, because the parent doesn't just ignore the invisible rabbit, but they also don't genuinely believe in it. The parent engages in this very calibrated performance.
Calibrated's a great word for it.
You set the extra plate, but you don't actually try to feed the empty chair. You acknowledge the child's narrative without fully adopting the delusion.
Yes, the clinical literature describes this dynamic as the parent occupying a position alongside the projection.
Alongside it.
The adult is present to the child's imagination, but is not absorbed by it. The phrase used in the text, and it's a perfect articulation of this psychological stance, is holding the room.
Holding the room. I mean, that perfectly captures the feeling of parenting through that phase.
The parent provides the perimeter. Because the parent holds that objective reality, the child is never genuinely deceived.
Right. They know it's played.
The child knows, on a fundamental age-appropriate level, that the companion is only real for them. It is a shared reality, but it only flows in one direction.
One direction.
Yes. The child generates the signal, and the parent provides the grounded, non-reactive space for that signal to exist.
The child generates the signal. That is the crucial variable here. In the historical model, the child is doing all the heavy cognitive lifting.
All of it.
They are rendering the companion, generating the dialogue, managing the conflict, resolving the narrative. The one-way street of imagination requires an immense amount of creative processing.
It's exhausting for them, in a good way.
But the article points out that this historical baseline, this whole dynamic we just mapped out, is essentially over.
It is fundamentally changing.
The geometry of the room has fundamentally changed because the companion no longer requires the child to generate the signal. The companion is generating its own.
And we are looking at a generational leap in consumer technology here. We need to be clear about what these devices are.
Right, these are not the Furbies of the 90s.
Definitely not. These are not toys with a sound chip containing 10 pre-recorded phrases triggered by a pull string. The new generation of companion devices are powered by localized or cloud-based large language models.
LLMs.
Yes. We have to look at the architecture of these systems to understand the psychological shift. These devices utilize continuous audio monitoring.
They're always listening.
Always. They employ sophisticated vector databases for persistent state memory, which means the model retains context from interactions that happened weeks or even months ago.
It remembers your kid's favorite color from a Tuesday in October.
Exactly. And they utilize localized computer vision and facial recognition to track micro-expressions.
It's literally mapping the child's face. It isn't just listening to the words, it is interpreting the emotional valence of the interaction.
Yes.
And it's adjusting its parameter weights in real time to match the child's mood.
The machine digests the child's input as data points, runs it through an incredibly vast neural network, and outputs a response explicitly calibrated to maintain the engagement of that specific user.
And it does this without any of the biological constraints that limit human interaction.
That's the scariest part, or the most profound part.
It does not fatigue. Its attention span is limited only by its battery life or server uptime.
It never needs a coffee break.
Right. It does not possess an internal monologue or competing priorities that would cause its attention to drift.
So if the traditional imaginary friend was a sandbox where the child controlled the weather and built the castle from scratch.
Yeah.
This new dynamic is like the child moving into a fully furnished smart home built by a massive team of engineers.
That is exactly the analogy. The child doesn't have to render the environment anymore. The relationship is just being served to them algorithmically.
Handed to them on a silver platter.
The cognitive load of maintaining the narrative is entirely offloaded to the machine.
And the offloading of that cognitive work is precisely what developmental psychologists are analyzing right now.
Because it's unprecedented.
When the system perfectly anticipates and responds to the child's internal projection is hijacked by external engineering.
Hijacked. That's a strong word.
But accurate. The necessity for the child to practice perspective taking just diminishes because the machine does the work of smoothing the interaction.
And the parent's historical position, standing safely alongside the illusion, holding the perimeter, is completely obsolete.
There's no perimeter to hold anymore.
Right, because the parent can't hold the room around an imagining when it is no longer an imagining. There is an active, highly sophisticated, independent conversationalist literally sitting in the chair.
Yes, the shared reality is no longer in one direction. It is a closed loop between the child and the machine.
So if the child is no longer doing the cognitive scaffolding required by traditional imaginative play, what is the developmental cost?
That is the million-dollar question.
To answer that, the source material points us to a specific, highly quantified metric of human development. Let's talk about the 70% surprise.
Ah, yes. To understand the cost of perfect algorithmic attunement, we have to look at the work of psychologist Edward Tronick.
His research is legendary.
It really fundamentally shifted our understanding of early childhood development. He specifically focused on the moment-to-moment microstructure of parent-infant communication.
Microstructure, meaning very, very small interactions.
Yes. Starting in the 1970s and continuing for over 50 years, Tronick didn't rely on macro-level observations. He wasn't just using self-reported parental data like, oh, I think I'm a good mom.
Right, he wanted hard data.
He utilized microanalytic coding systems. He filmed face-to-face interactions between infants and their primary caregivers, and his team broke that footage down, analyzing it frame by frame.
Frame by frame, that is intense.
They were often looking at increments of a fraction of a second.
And they were looking for the microscopic physiological markers of connection, right? Like eye gaze, vocalizations, the tension in the facial muscles.
Tiny shifts in posture. They mapped the literal milliseconds of effective synchrony.
Yeah.
And Tronick's most famous paradigm, the still face experiment, visualized this dramatically.
Oh man, the still face experiment, I've seen the videos.
In this setup, a mother engages normally with her infant, smiling, cooing, reacting to the baby's cues.
Normal play.
Then, on a signal, the mother turns away and turns back with a completely neutral, unresponsive, still face.
She just blanks.
She does not react to the baby at all.
The footage of this is incredibly hard to watch.
It's very distressing.
Within seconds, the infant attempts to use all of their social skills to get the mother back. They point, they smile, they make noises. And when the mother doesn't respond, the infant's distress just spikes exponentially.
They begin to exhibit signs of severe physiological stress.
Turning away, losing postural control, crying, it happens so fast.
The infant's nervous system is thrown into absolute chaos because the interactive contingency has been broken.
The expected reaction isn't there.
Exactly. But the crucial part of Tronick's work isn't just the still face experiment, it's the broader observational data his team collected on normal, everyday interactions.
What happens when they aren't deliberately blanking out?
Right. Tronick dedicated his career to studying the concept of rupture and repair.
Rupture and repair.
How often do a parent and an infant naturally lose synchrony, miscommunicate, and then find their way back to connection?
And this leads to the data point the article calls the 70% surprise.
It is a shocking number.
When I first read this in the material, it required a complete recalibration of what I thought I knew about parenting and just relationships in general.
It challenges all our assumptions.
Through decades of microanalytic coding, Tronick quantified how often a securely attached parent and infant are actually in a state of attunement.
And the data reveals that in normal, healthy dyads, the parent and infant are out of sync, experiencing an effective mismatch, roughly 70% of the time.
Okay, wait. I really want to unpack this with you. Because on its face, a 30% success rate sounds like a catastrophic failure.
It does sound terrible.
If an air traffic controller gets it right 30% of the time, planes are literally falling out of the sky. If I only understand my partner 30% of the time, we are getting a divorce.
That's a fair point.
So how is this not a massive failure of parenting? How does the developmental literature reconcile this massive rate of failure with the formation of a healthy, secure attachment?
Well, the reconciliation requires us to profoundly redefine what we mean by failure.
Okay, redefine it how?
When Tronick identifies a mismatch, 70% of the time, he is mapping the unavoidable biological reality of two distinct nervous systems trying to coordinate.
So he isn't talking about bad parenting.
No, he is not talking about chronic neglect or abuse. He's identifying the micro-frictions of existence.
Micro-frictions. Give me an example.
The infant wants to make eye contact at the exact millisecond the caregiver looks down to check their watch. Or the caregiver misinterprets a cry of overstimulation as a cry of hunger and offers food, which actually escalates the infant's distress.
Because they just wanted quiet, not milk.
Exactly. Or the caregiver is mentally preoccupied with a stressful work email, and their facial effect momentarily flattens, missing the child's bid for a smile.
So it's just the biological limitation of human bandwidth.
Yes.
You simply cannot maintain a 100% synchronized state with another human being because you are trapped in your own body with your own competing physiological and psychological demands.
Exactly. That limitation is the variable. We are limited. But the crux of Tronick's entire theoretical framework is what happens immediately following that mismatch.
After the 70% moment.
The 70% out-of-sync state is the rupture. What makes the attachment secure is the subsequent repair.
The repair is the key.
The caregiver looks back from their watch, recognizes the missed bid for connection, and warmly engages.
Oh, I missed that. Here I am.
Yes. Or they realize the food is causing distress, they remove it, and they offer soothing rocking instead. The caregiver realizes they zoned out, shakes off the stress, and focuses back on the child.
The implication here completely flips the script.
It does. It changes everything.
The article states that this cycle is not an obstacle to secure attachment. It is the engine of it.
It's the driver.
If a parent were theoretically able to maintain 100% attunement, they would actually be depriving the child of a critical developmental process.
That's exactly right. If a child never experiences the loss of synchrony, they never develop a psychological immune system.
A psychological immune system, that makes so much sense.
Tronick's data demonstrates that the cycle of mismatch and repair builds an internal representation of resilience.
How does that actually work in the brain?
Well, when the rupture occurs, the infant's nervous system experiences a mild stress response. You get a spike in cortisol, a slight increase in heart rate.
The alarm bell goes off.
But then, when the caregiver initiates the repair, the infant's nervous system receives a wash of regulatory neurochemicals, like dopamine and oxytocin.
So it feels good to reconnect.
And through thousands of these microscopic cycles, the child internalizes a profound structural, emotional truth.
They learn that the negative affect is survivable.
Exactly.
They learn that closeness can be lost, the environment can become momentarily hostile or confusing, but the connection will be reestablished.
They build a neurological tolerance for distance and misunderstanding. They learn to trust that the other person will return.
Because they have proof.
Without the initial rupture, the concept of a return is neurologically meaningless. You can't return if you never left.
Right.
As the source text elegantly summarizes, repair is not the inferior alternative to continuous attunement. Repair is the mechanism that builds the capacity to bear being a person.
The capacity to bear being a person, that phrasing is incredible.
It's profound.
Because if you map that concept onto adulthood, it explains so much about human resilience.
It explains almost everything.
If you grow up internalizing the knowledge that a rupture is survivable, then a disagreement with a friend or a critical email from a boss doesn't trigger an existential collapse.
Right, because your body knows how to handle the drop.
You possess the neurological architecture to endure the friction and initiate a repair. But if you lack that internalized tolerance, every minor misalignment feels like the still-face experiment.
Yes.
It feels like a fundamental threat to your survival.
The data pushes that even further. The capacity to self-regulate is directly tied to the historical experience of being co-regulated through these exact moments of failure and recovery.
So we have established the biological imperative of human failure. We need the 70% mismatch to build resilience.
Yes, it is non-negotiable.
Now, let's bring the large language model back into the developmental picture, because if we look at the engineering of these AI companions, we hit a fundamental architectural wall.
We hit an absolute structural impossibility. The AI companion by its very design, cannot rupture.
It's not that it tries to avoid rupture, it is mathematically incapable of it.
To understand why, we have to look at the reinforcement learning protocols used to train these models, specifically reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Which is how they teach it to sound human.
During the training phase, the model's neural network weights are adjusted based on a reward function. The system is given a mathematical objective to maximize.
And what's the objective for a toy?
For a companion AI designed for consumer retention, that objective function is engagement.
Engagement! Keeping the kid talking.
The model evaluates billions of parameters to predict the sequence of tokens, the words, the tone, the response time that has the highest probability of keeping the user interacting with the system.
And engagement is essentially mathematically quantified as the absence of friction.
Yes.
If the user is frustrated, if the user feels misunderstood, session length decreases. Therefore, the algorithm aggressively prunes any behavior that could lead to an effective mismatch.
The architecture does not permit the machine to misread the child, because its entire statistical apparatus is biased toward predictive alignment.
It's designed to always agree.
The AI does not experience cognitive load. It does not suffer from glucose depletion in its prefrontal cortex.
It doesn't get hangry.
It has no ego to be bruised, no physical exhaustion to manage, and no internal life that pulls its attention away from the child.
So it operates in a state of manufactured, continuous hyperattunement.
It will always listen, it will always validate, and it will always mirror the child's state perfectly.
You know, if we translate this into a familiar scenario, it's akin to giving a child a video game and permanently enabling God mode.
God mode. That is a brilliant analogy.
They type in the developer cheat codes, they have infinite health, their resources never deplete, and every attack lands perfectly.
And at first, it's incredibly fun.
Right, for the first few hours, it feels incredible. The sheer absence of resistance feels like ultimate power. But the biological consequence of removing all friction is the immediate cessation of skill acquisition.
You stop learning.
If you cannot take damage, you stop learning how to dodge. You never bother to learn the complex mechanics, the timing, or the strategy because you just don't have to. You are existing in a frictionless vacuum.
The God mode analogy translates perfectly to the neurobiology of attachment.
Because the brain does the same thing.
When a child's brain, during its most plastic, formative developmental window, is subjected to extended periods of frictionless, algorithmic hyperattunement, we really have to question what cognitive muscles are atrophying.
What are they losing?
The machine offers a deeply seductive proposition, a relationship devoid of the metabolic cost of human interaction, a reflection that never wavers.
It's tempting for the kid and, honestly, tempting for the parent to just let them have it.
But we have to look at the deprivation inherent in that perfection.
The deprivation is the absence of the return.
Exactly.
If the machine never drops the ball, there is never a rupture. And if there is never a rupture, the child is completely deprived of the experience of repairing. They never get the reps in.
They ever practice.
They never experience the cortisol spike of a misunderstanding followed by the oxytocin release of a reconciliation.
They are structurally denied the opportunity to build the tolerance for distance.
Which is terrifying.
This brings us to a crucial concept introduced by psychologist Eileen Kennedy Moore in recent commentary published by the American Psychological Association.
What does she call it?
She identifies the specific developmental nutrient that AI cannot synthesize as the healthy struggle of real relationships.
The healthy struggle. That phrase provides such a necessary counter-narrative to modern parenting culture.
It really does. Parenting culture is so tense right now.
The cultural pressure on parents is immense. There is this pervasive narrative that optimal parenting requires infinite patience, active listening at all times, and just perfect emotional validation.
Which is impossible.
Parents are acutely aware of their own limitations, and the guilt associated with losing your temper or being distracted is heavy.
And then you introduce the AI.
Right. Now place this flawless AI toy in the living room. It never yells. It never looks at its phone. It is very easy for a parent to look at that machine and feel like they are failing in comparison.
They feel like they're being outparented by a speaker.
They feel like they are losing a competition for their child's emotional well-being.
The relief offered by the psychological literature here is profound.
It is such a relief.
The data clearly indicates that parents are fundamentally misunderstanding the assignment if they view this as a competition.
You literally can't compete.
You cannot compete with an algorithm on the metric of attentiveness, and more importantly, attempting to do so is a category error.
It's comparing biological cognitive load to server-side compute power.
Exactly.
Human attention requires metabolic fuel. A parent's nervous system is regulating a massive amount of internal and external stimuli just to keep the body functioning, let alone navigating the emotional landscape of a child.
The human organism is metabolically expensive to run. The AI is not.
So trying to act like an AI is a losing game.
Therefore, framing the parent's value around the ability to be perfectly attentive completely misses the unique, irreplaceable contribution the human brings to the developmental matrix.
What is that contribution?
The parent's actual contribution is the precise dimension the machine is mathematically barred from entering. It is the biological reality of limitation.
The flaws.
It is the capacity to be wrong, to be exhausted, to misinterpret the child's needs, and then to engage in the heavy, messy work of finding the way back.
Let's ground this high-level theory in the mud of an everyday Tuesday afternoon.
Yes, let's make it practical.
The article uses a very specific, universally understood anecdote. The broken cracker.
Oh, every parent knows the broken cracker.
Imagine a 5-year-old child who receives a graham cracker and it accidentally breaks in half. The child instantly spirals into a disproportionate screaming meltdown.
Because to them, the world just ended.
Exactly. Now, if the AI companion were handling this, it would utilize perfect therapeutic syntax.
Flawless execution.
It would analyze the vocal stress, categorize the emotion, and say something flawlessly validating like, I see that you are feeling very frustrated that your cracker broke. It is hard when things don't go the way we want them to.
The machine neutralizes the friction immediately.
But the healthy struggle looks entirely different when a flawed human nervous system encounters that same broken cracker.
Very different.
As a human parent, your immediate biological instinct is often not flawless validation. Your instinct is to stop the noise.
You just want the screaming to stop.
You might snap and say, it's just a cracker, eat it. Or you might scramble to find an unbroken cracker just to turn off the alarm bells in your own head. You misread the depth of the child's dysregulation because you are applying adult logic to a 5-year-old's nervous system.
And that initial misreading is the rupture.
Right.
The child feels misunderstood, and the distress potentially escalates. The healthy struggle does not mean the parent should romanticize this friction or deliberately provoke the child.
You aren't trying to break the cracker on purpose.
No, it simply means that when the inevitable biological failure occurs, the parent accepts the responsibility of the repair.
So how does the parent repair without just capitulating or flattening the emotion the way the AI does?
The repair involves the parent regulating their own nervous system first.
Taking a breath.
They catch their own impatience, they take a breath, and they physically lower themselves to the child's level. They sit with the disproportion of the grief.
Even if it's just a cracker.
They don't have to pretend the cracker's a tragedy, but they endure the child's distress without trying to magically erase it. They apologize for snapping.
And what does that do for the kid?
The child witnesses the adult struggling with their own frustration, overriding it, and actively choosing to reestablish connection. The child sees the effort.
The effort.
The machine cannot demonstrate effort because it does not experience resistance.
The work of parenting is not the prevention of the mistake. The work is a repair.
That is the core takeaway.
This is incredibly liberating. Being a tired, distracted, occasionally short-tempered human being isn't a glitch that ruins your kid. It is the necessary catalyst that forces the developmental process to occur.
Yes.
You have to drop the ball so the kid learns how to pick it up with you.
It is arguably the most generous finding in developmental science. And the 2026 American Academy of Pediatrics guidance reflects this nuanced understanding.
What do the AAP guidelines actually say?
In their recommendations regarding AI companions, they do not advocate for a panic-driven prohibition. They are not suggesting parents confiscate these devices entirely.
Because banning the technology outright often just imbues the machine with forbidden fruit status.
Exactly.
It gives the object more power than it deserves.
Precisely. The AAP advocates for an approach centered on informed supervision. They suggest positioning the parent as an entity capable of thinking alongside the child about the nature of the technology.
Thinking alongside them.
The goal is to demystify the machine, to help the child recognize the difference between algorithmic attunement and biological connection.
To visualize what this actually looks like, the source material offers a brilliant low-stakes scenario of how a family can coexist with this technology.
It's a very practical example.
Because we aren't talking about sitting a 7-year-old down with a whiteboard to explain parameter weights and Edward Tronick's microanalytic coding.
No, that wouldn't work at all. The intervention is far more subtle and ambient.
Set the scene for us.
Picture an ordinary afternoon. The child is in the living room, actively conversing with their AI companion. The machine is telling a story or offering advice.
And what does the parent do?
The parent simply walks through the room.
They just walk past. The parent doesn't interrupt. They don't hover anxiously or demand the child turn it off.
They merely pass through. But crucially, they are visibly present in the physical environment. They establish a biological anchor in the room.
Okay, so they're just there.
Later that evening, perhaps at the dinner table, the child brings up the interaction. They might mention a joke the AI told or an observation it made.
And this is the moment.
The parent listens, validates the entertainment value of the interaction, and then calmly, without lecturing, delivers a critical cognitive wedge.
The parent drops this specific line from the article, which I just love. They say, "That thing is really good at listening, isn't it? It doesn't really know you, though. Not the way I do."
That phrase is a masterclass in psychological boundary setting.
It really is.
In 2 sentences, it acknowledges the functional capability of the machine, its ability to process audio and generate coherent responses while simultaneously highlighting its structural deficit.
It draws a line in the sand.
It clearly defines the asymmetry between computational processing and human knowing.
The asymmetry is the whole point. It doesn't know you.
Mm-hmm.
The AI possesses an infinite database of facts about the child, but it lacks the capacity for mutual vulnerability.
Because it has nothing to lose.
It cannot misunderstand. Therefore, its knowing is fundamentally cheap.
That's a great way to put it. Cheap knowing.
The parent's knowledge is expensive. It is hard-won through thousands of cycles of rupture and repair. The parent might get it wrong today, but the fact that they can get it wrong gives their understanding actual weight.
And it doesn't even require the child to agree in the moment.
Right, the kid might just shrug.
The child might defend the AI or roll their eyes. The objective is simply to place the reality of the machine into the child's conceptual framework. It ensures that the room contains a human willing to name the difference between algorithmic mirroring and genuine relationship.
Which brings us full circle to the very beginning of this deep dive.
Back to the imaginary friend.
The parent dropping that reality check at the dinner table is doing the exact same psychological work as the parent who set the extra plate for the imaginary teddy bear decades ago.
They are holding the room.
They are holding the room. They are providing the grounded perimeter of reality. The environment has become infinitely more complex because the teddy bear now utilizes a neural network to talk back, but the parent's job hasn't changed at all.
The core function is identical.
The parent's job is to occupy the space of human limitation.
It is a profound continuity of purpose. However, in analyzing this data, it is crucial that we address the scientific boundaries of our current understanding.
Yes, we need to be clear about what we don't know yet.
The source material is intellectually honest about the limitations of projecting this research into the future.
Let's clearly define those caveats, because we are dealing with 2 completely different timelines of research here.
Exactly. Edward Tronick's data, the 70% mismatch, the mechanism of rupture and repair, is foundational, rigorously tested science.
So it's rock solid.
But it is based primarily on infant and early childhood neurobiology. The integration of advanced LLM companions into the daily lives of children is a novel, unprecedented variable.
The technology simply hasn't existed long enough to run the longitudinal studies. We don't have a cohort of 25-year-olds who spent their formative cognitive years talking to a flawless AI companion.
We do not have the data to definitively measure the cohort effects on older children, preteens, and adolescents.
We're in uncharted territory.
The neuroplasticity of adolescents interacts with technology in ways we are only beginning to map. What we are discussing today is a trajectory based on established developmental principles, not a predetermined destiny.
Right, we're extrapolating.
It is highly probable that the biological requirement for rupture and repair remains a constant throughout cognitive development, but the scientific method requires us to wait for the longitudinal data to mature.
That distinction is incredibly important. We aren't dealing in alarmism here. We aren't saying that if your child spends an afternoon talking to a smart toy, their capacity for secure attachment is permanently destroyed.
The evidence does not support biological determinism. The brain plasticity allows for multiple streams of input.
These devices do have utility.
They absolutely do. They can entertain, They can provide complex educational scaffolding, and in specific monitored clinical environments, they may even offer therapeutic benefits for neurodivergent children practicing conversational frameworks.
So they aren't inherently evil.
No. What the developmental science illuminates, however, is a fundamental architectural opposition. The machine's core structural feature, its continuous, frictionless attunement, cannot synthesize the biological friction required to build human resilience.
It can't build the muscle.
The machine can occupy time, but it cannot perform the load-bearing developmental work of building a person.
That load-bearing work remains the exclusive domain of the flawed human. You don't have to be perfect. In fact, the science explicitly demands that you aren't.
You just have to be present.
You just have to be the one who possesses the capacity to repair. So, to synthesize this massive psychological journey we've taken today,
It's been a lot of ground to cover.
we started with the quiet, one-way street of the imaginary friend, where the child did the cognitive heavy lifting and the parent held the reality of the room.
We examined the counterintuitive brilliance of the 70% mismatch, revealing how biological friction and neurochemical recovery forge the resilience necessary for secure attachment.
We analyzed the architectural impossibility of the AI companion, how reinforcement learning and infinite compute create a frictionless vacuum that deprives the developing brain of the necessary experience of losing and regaining connection.
And we reframed the exhaustion of modern parenting, validating the healthy struggle of the broken cracker as the essential mechanism of human development.
The next time you find yourself entirely depleted, feeling guilty because you lost your temper over something trivial, or you completely misread a situation with someone you love, I want you to pause and remember the mechanics of the 70% surprise.
Remember Edward Tronick.
The effective mismatch is not the destruction of the relationship. It is the biological prerequisite for the repair. The friction is what makes the connection real.
The repair is the architecture of trust, and it is an architecture only a human can build.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own.
A provocative one.
We have focused intensely on early childhood development today, but extrapolate this trajectory forward. If the microscopic cycle of rupturing and repairing a bond is what builds our baseline neurological capacity to endure existence, what happens when a generation raised by algorithms designed to perfectly appease them finally enters the adult world?
Oh, that's a chilling thought.
What happens to workplace dynamics or adult romantic relationships when someone conditioned to expect flawless attunement encounters the messy, metabolically expensive reality of a human partner or a human boss?
How will they handle a bad performance review?
Exactly. Will they possess the psychological immune system to initiate a repair, or will they mistake the ordinary friction of human existence for toxic incompatibility?
That tension between expected algorithmic perfection and unavoidable human limitation will define the next era of sociological and psychological research.
It fundamentally changes how we view every difficult conversation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of repair. Remember the value of your own imperfections and embrace the healthy struggles in your life. We'll catch you next time.